Greetings all, FerrariMan601 here. Well, the time has come to do the comparison of comparisons. Now that we have new sounds for the McLaren MP4 13, the car is in a state which I consider to be presentable. Yes, it does require some work still, but it is good enough for government work, as they say. So, how fast is this compared to RSS Formula 2000 V10? Well, this car's from 1998, we have to remember. Slightly different tires, slightly different regulations. The McLaren has a 6-speed gearbox and 780 horsepower, but it is more aerodynamically efficient than the F1 2000 Ferrari, let's call it what it is. The Ferrari has 2 years more in development. It does have more downforce at the expense of top speed. However, this McLaren won a world championship just like its Ferrari counterpart 2 years later. Now, for RSS Formula 2000 V10, or the Ferrari F1 2000 as it actually is. This car has the same displacement of V10 engine. 3000cc, 3 liters on the nose. This car develops exactly 800 horsepower. Compared to the McLaren, it is very similar in other specs as well. The McLaren has 780 horsepower. This car has bang on the nose 800. It's a little bit more draggy than the McLaren. However, at the expense of top speed, the Ferrari does have significantly more downforce. The Ferrari also feels much more positive on the front end. Remember, this is a Michael Schumacher designed race car. Therefore, the Ferrari, in keeping with Schumacher's driving style, is very pointy. I personally like that as well, and that does pay dividends when you do try to thrash it on a hot lap, as we shall see. Ultimately, though, both cars are the absolute pinnacle of design in their respective eras. They both won a Constructors' Championship for their respective teams, as well as a Drivers' Championship for their respective drivers. How do they fare pitted against each other today, head-to-head? Well, let's find out. Before we do the side-by-side hot lap on these cars, just some notes on what it's like to drive both of them compared to each other. The McLaren, it is a much older mod here in Assetto Corsa, therefore it doesn't have the benefit of the added development as the RSS Formula 2000. However, because it is very similar to the RSS car, it's the same dimensions, it's the same weight, it has very similar tires, slightly different, only 3 grooves on the McLaren's tires, 1998, 4 grooves on the RSS tires. Again, that was a change in the regulations for 1999 and beyond. The McLaren, though, it does not feel nearly as planted on the front end as the RSS does. Of course, the RSS car, based on the Ferrari F1 2000, that was designed for Michael Schumacher, and Schumacher loved pointy cars. Because of that, you do notice a whole lot more sureness on the front end when you go and turn into a corner in the RSS versus the McLaren. The McLaren, though, it is very indicative of how Adrian Newey liked to design a car. You'll notice on the McLaren it's got an exhaust-blown diffuser, much like the Red Bulls of the early 2010s, also designed by Adrian Newey. Newey loves working on aerodynamics from the midline aft. He loves to play with the rear end on the car. That's where he likes to generate his downforce. In a driving style for somebody like Sebastian Vettel, who was very sensitive to rear stability on a race car, that plays into his hands big time. We saw in 2014, when rear downforce was removed from Formula One cars, Sebastian Vettel struggled in a car which won the championship for him the previous year. Therefore, the McLaren, designed by Newey, it's still playing with these principles even though we're now talking about 20 years past. Newey loves to play with rear downforce and rear aero in his designs. The Ferrari, on the other hand, it's a completely different kettle of fish. Schumacher loved a pointy car, and the Ferrari is very pointy, or the RSS as I should call it. It's very sure-footed on the front end. You know exactly where the front two corners are at all times. You can turn it into an apex and know exactly where you're going to hit the apex curbing every single time. It's very confidence-inspiring if you are a driver who likes to drive the car from the front end, as I very much like to do. If you're somebody who is very sensitive to the rear end, who's not particularly keen on accepting oversteer in your driving style, well, the McLaren is going to play into your hands wonderfully well. The McLaren is very sensitive on the rear. That exhaust-blown diffuser definitely helping or hurting depending on your perspective. The car's very sensitive to throttle angle in medium and high-speed corners. Both cars do have very good high-speed grip. However, when we get into the low and medium speed stuff, the RSS definitely takes the cake because it does have somewhat better weight distribution, and it's also not so sensitive on the rear end aerodynamically. At low speeds, it uses the tires much more effectively than the McLaren does, which in my opinion makes it much more tractable, much more drivable, and as you saw there, made it faster overall than the McLaren, despite the McLaren having a top speed advantage thanks to the lower amount of downforce that it has and therefore a little bit less drag. However, I know you want to see the head-to-head comparison of both of these cars, so let's get on with it. Also, the results are in the final ending screen there. Until next time, though, I'd like to thank you all very much for watching. For RSS 601 saying enjoy the side-by-side, and of course we will see you soon.